This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones, the companions avoided the return journey through the vault of Penmelky by means of a supernatural fog conjured by Varfell, which allowed them to traverse the valley from the mountainside ledge. Once again on solid ground, and with the fog dissipated, the companions sought some sign of their guide, Hedrick. They discovered the remnants of a hastily abandoned camp, but no trace of the mountain man. With nothing else for it, the companions decided to return to Varfell. With a journey of 3 days ahead of them, they wasted no further time and left the valley of Penmelky behind. They followed the path that Hedrick had led them, and by the end of the first day, they made camp in a wooded valley. But unbeknownst to the companions, they had been stalked by a group of Sheodugengar, Shadow Walkers, malevolent creatures born from the rift. A brief but intense battle ensued. Talion recognized the creatures for what they were, and relayed that they could be harmed by exposure to light. Valen produced the Moonstone, which seared the Sheodugengar with its enchanted light. But the ferocity of the creatures was not dimmed. Lena and Edith were paralyzed by the Sheodugengar's attacks, as the creatures pinned them and began to consume the pair's shadows. Valen was able to save Lena by throwing the creature from the cleric by means of the spell Push, and Beric slew another, before the Sheodugengar were finally destroyed by the Moonstone's radiance. Victory could not have come soon enough, for Edith, finally released from the grip of the foul creature, has been left unconscious and gravely wounded. Chapter 72, Part 1. 3 days ago. The sounds of men at work filtered in through the open window of the modest chamber. The clang of hammers striking anvils in bright, ringing cadence, the rasping chorus of saws biting through timber, and the barked orders of drill masters putting warriors through their paces, all mingled with the ceaseless hubbub of daily life rising from the growing settlement. Reynard of Harburg sat in silent contemplation as he waited. The tips of his fingers pressed so tightly together that the flesh had turned bloodless. The tension in his hands mirroring the calculations turning behind his cold eyes. On the table before him was a casket, banded in strips of dulled iron. Cairo Morthal had become more than just a stronghold. In recent months, the village of Tremorthal, which lay directly to the south, had been swallowed by the fortress's expansion, its cottages and fields replaced by walls and workshops, and was quickly growing into a fortified town, bristling with scaffolds, watchtowers, and half-finished defences. The preparations for war demanded skilled craftsmen, smiths whose forges burned day and night, armourers shaping steel into helms and mail, and bowyers bending seasoned yew to be capped with horn. It had drawn people from across the land, others coming to support the swelling population. Carpenters, thatchers, wheelwrights, and all the other trades needed in a settlement rising swiftly from frontier post to martial centre. The fortress and town were located in the domain of Lord Tremaine, one of Lord Polmir's allies, and long timber halls were being constructed as barracks to accommodate the troops of all the rebel lords. Their vanguards had already arrived, standards snapping above their encampments as they established headquarters within the town. But many more would follow in the coming weeks, swelling the roads with spearmen and supply wagons alike. Reynard had commandeered accommodation for his own men, 200 disciples of the Brethren of the Purifying Light, warriors unwaveringly loyal to their holy cause. He himself had taken the chaplain's quarters within the fortress itself, much to the chagrin of its occupant, whose protests had been fervent but brief. The man's objections had quickly fallen silent beneath Reynard's cold, unblinking gaze. Lord Polmir would arrive in the coming days to oversee the preparations. The man may have been easy to incite to rebellion, driven by pride and ambition, but Reynard did not doubt he was a capable military tactician, dangerous when given purpose and command. Caer Morphel would not only provide a staging ground from which the rebels would launch their attack, but it would be crucial in maintaining their supply lines, connected as it was by river to the bustling port of Helligan on the south coast of the peninsula, where ships unloaded grain, weapons, and mercenaries in equal measure. Reynard's concerns were larger though. 2 of the Hellstones evaded his grasp, and he could not be sure that possessing 3 would be enough to maintain his control over Polmir once victory seemed within reach. His once trusted lieutenant, Maelor, had failed to acquire the Eye of Slethra and allowed its keeper, Lamorna, to slip through his fingers into the wilds. Not only that, but the Eye of Krevik was no doubt in the hands of the warlock, Valen, and his heretic bitch. He had received word that they were last seen heading into the high passes of the Dragonspine Mountains. For what purpose, he knew not. They were clearly capable. They had already slain his friend and most trusted servant Adric, a loss that still stung like a wound not yet closed. To send another warband to find them at this time would be folly, risking further loss for uncertain gain. No, they would have to wait. For now, his best chance was to pursue the Eye of Slethra. After all, Maelor's efforts had not been wholly in vain. He had captured Lamorna's apprentice. Cirque had resisted more mundane methods of interrogation, enduring hunger, pain, and isolation with stubborn resilience. Yet, in captivity alone, he served a purpose. Kept alive, Cirque's warlock blood had further revived the Eye of Mordgren, and through the lingering connection between master and apprentice, had imbued the Hellstone of forbidden knowledge with a glimmer of Lamorna's whereabouts. Not a precise location, but a sense of direction and distance. A sharp rap on the door broke Reynard's contemplation, and Maelor presently entered. He was a wiry man in his 30s, his sharp features and cautious movements better suited to the whispering intrigues of court than the brutality of battle. It was no wonder that he had failed to defeat a powerful witch.
You sent word, Reynard?
Maelor's eyes were furtive, wary of further inciting the cleric's bile. His posture careful, deferential. Reynard said nothing, instead simply gesturing for his lieutenant to be seated. The cleric waited for Maelor to comply before speaking.
"I must away."
His tone was abrupt, leaving no room for debate.
"Your liege will come soon,"
he said, referring to Lord Polmir, to whom Maelor was steward.
"You must remain here to prepare for his arrival."
Maelor's expression was quizzical, uncertainty flickering across his face.
Where go you? Wish you not to be here yourself?
"I cannot. I must accomplish what you failed to."
The cleric's words were cutting, delivered without raising his voice. Maelor's cheeks flushed with restrained humiliation.
"Watch Polmir while I am gone. He thinks that he is in control, and such men are dangerous.
Maelor dipped his head to indicate he understood, though unease lingered in his eyes.
And what about Cirque? Shall he burn?
A cruel excitement began to creep into the steward's voice.
Not yet. I shall take him with me. He will no doubt prove useful leverage. Now, find me a dozen men and horses. I leave as a 10 spell.
Maelor rose from his seat and took his leave, boots echoing softly along the corridor beyond. Reynard waited for the door to close, then opened the casket. The interior was lined with dull sheets of lead, and inside, resting upon a cushion of dyed red wool, was a finely wrought, gold-gilded helmet, replete with cheek guards and a decorative ridge running from brow to nape. Across its dome were 5 circular housings, spaced evenly apart. 3 contained jewels, each the size of a chestnut, a diamond, an emerald, and a black opal, all shining faintly in the dim light, as though lit from within by captive stars. The cleric reached in, lifting the helmet with reverent fingers, its surprising weight settling into his palms. He stood and slipped the helm over his bald pate. His lips curled into a self-satisfied smile as power surged through him. His limbs felt stronger and faster, his senses sharpened, and his mind was flooded with arcane knowledge hitherto unknown to him. Secrets whispering like voices from beyond the veil. Back in episode 60, we learned that Cirque was a prisoner of Reynard of Harburg. Before the start of this episode, I asked the Oracle some questions to prompt what might happen next. Firstly, I asked if Lamorna might try to rescue her apprentice. That answer was a straight no. Then I asked if Cirque knew where Lamorna may have fled to. The answer to that question was a no but. That but fueled an idea that Cirque's blood, combined with the Eye of Mordgren's power, may unlock a means by which Reynard might track the final Hellstone. With that established, and with Maelor's previous failure, it was logical to me that Reynard would choose to track down Lamorna himself and claim the Eye of Selethra. Whether he achieves that end will remain to be seen. But now it's time to return to the companions. Following the battle with the Sheodu Gengar, Valen, Edith and Lena were all badly wounded. Rather than go through the healing rolls here, I rolled them off mic. The result was that through various spells and miracles, that evening and the following morning, all 3 were restored to full health. However, it is worth noting that when Valen attempted to cast Soothe on Lena at the end of day 63, I rolled a nat 20, a critical failure, which indicated a miscast. Rolling on my miscast table, the result was that Valen is unable to memorize that spell for 2 days, as his mind becomes blocked to it. You may have already noticed, but it's probably worth mentioning, that I have a house rule in which magic users cannot memorize the same spell twice. This means that Valen is effectively a spell down for 2 days. With that done, it's time to make some rolls for the remainder of their journey back to Varfell. Day 64, Weather. An 18, a glorious summer's day. Losing direction. A 4. Using the mountain of Andamathon as their point of navigation, the companions maintained the path that Hedrick had led them. Stumble upon. 12, nothing. And wandering encounter. A 4. Well, that is a relief. Day 65. Weather. A 2. That's a storm. It would seem that the weather front that threatened Canute 2 days earlier has turned south. Losing direction. Given the storm, I'm going to up the chances of losing direction to 4 in 6. A 6. Well, that is a surprise, but good luck for the party. Stumble upon. An 18, nothing. Wandering encounter. A 3, no encounter. Finally, Due to the combination of difficult terrain and the storm, I am going to make a roll to see whether there's any kind of dangerous weather-related incident. I'm going to put the chance at 4 in 6. A 6. It would seem the dice gods have decided the characters deserve a reprieve. Chapter 72, Part 2, Day 65, Morning. Party status: Beric, 60 out of 61 hit points. Lena, 39 out of 39 hit points. Valen, 22 out of 22 hit points. Talion, 33 out of 33 hit points. Edith, 14 out of 14 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Charm Animal, Push, Shield, Entangle, Revive, Clairvoyance, Ignite, Unseal, and Dragon's Breath. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, Rally, Imbue, and Lullaby. Edith has memorized Flame, Sleep, Camouflage, and Knock. Lena can pray for 3 first-level miracles, 3 second-level miracles, 2 third-level miracles, 2 fourth-level miracles, and 1 fifth-level miracle. The first cold pinpricks of rain and the bite of a brisk northerly wind marked the day as the companions broke camp. By mid-morning, the iron-grey clouds brooding over the Dragonspine could hold on no more, and finally spilled their burden upon the mountains. Only the day before, the weather had been warm and fine, granting the company good speed after their harrowing encounter with the Sheodugengar. By nightfall, they had made camp beneath the looming shadow of Andamavon, its vast peak standing eternally watchful. Though her wounds had been healed, Edith had grown withdrawn since the attack, her gaze often distant, as though still standing on the precipice of death. Whether it was the closeness of her demise, or the accumulated weight of the trials she had endured in recent weeks, none could say. Whatever the cause, she could not be coaxed. Not yet. In truth, none of them were inclined to speak. The wind howled unchecked along the Dragonspine, tearing at cloaks and hurling rain into their faces as they began their slow descent. They followed the river that flowed from the glacier crowning Andamavon, its once clear waters now swollen and churning with melt and rain, foaming angrily as it raced downhill. Even in such wretched conditions, the grandeur of the land could not be ignored. Below them stretched the endless forests of Gwyllis Coos and Coos Gwerth, dark canopies rolling like a green sea. Beyond lay the hills and grasslands of Lord Petroc's domain, and threading through it all, the steel-grey ribbon of the River Nade, glinting faintly beneath the storm-shrouded sky. Pulling their woolen cloaks tightly about them, the companions pressed on down the wooded slopes, keeping as close as they could to the half-lost path that clung to the river's edge. The descent was perilous. Mud slicked the ground, stones shifted treacherously beneath their boots, and more than once they were forced to edge around steep banks or slippery waterfalls. Yet, by some mercy, they reached the foothills by late afternoon without mishap. Here, the river had burst its banks entirely, necessitating a detour. Water had spilled across the meadows and pastures, transforming them into vast lakes of brown churn and debris. Most of the sheep that roamed here had fled to higher ground, clustering together miserably against the wind and rain, their mournful bleating carrying across the flooded fields. Others had not been so fortunate. Mud-caked bodies drifted aimlessly in the floodwater, grim evidence of the storm's sudden fury. Cold seeped into the companions' bones as they trudged onward. Cloaks heavy and sodden, no longer offering any real protection from the relentless rain. Only the promise of a warm fire and a hot meal kept their weary legs moving, despite their silent protests. As the afternoon bled into twilight, they crested a final hill, and there it was. Nearly a mile ahead stood a palisade, dark against the horizon, and beyond its gates, the comforting curl of smoke rising from countless hearths. The refuge they had sought at last. Varfell. Drawing nearer, the companions saw the town had been spared the worst of the flooding. The defensive ditch surrounding the palisade had done its work, siphoning away the excess water before it could overwhelm the settlement. At the south gate, two sullen-looking guards admitted them, with barely concealed impatience, eager to conclude their duty and retreat to the shelter of the gatehouse. The companions made their way through Varfell's streets, where thick mud sucked greedily at their boots, until they reached the welcome cobbles surrounding Lord Teuoc's hall. The storm had driven the sentries inside. The great oak doors were shut tight, but a narrow band of yellow light escaped from between them, promising warmth and fellowship. As they climbed the steps, the muffled roar of voices and laughter spilled through the wood. Beric raised his fist and struck the door heavily, and the noise within fell abruptly silent. Moments later, the door swung open, unleashing a flood of firelight, warmth, and the rich scent of roasting meat. Faces turned appraisingly towards them as Beric crossed the threshold unchallenged. Expressions of surprise and curiosity followed them, their filthy, torn, and damaged garments clearly attesting to news worth hearing. At the far end of the hall, Lord Teuoc sat flanked by his wife and closest advisors. The Thane rose as the companions reached his table, his sharp eyes lingering on each before returning to Beric.
Well, my friends,
The Thane said at last, a faint smile touching his lips.
it would seem you have a tale to tell.
So the companions have returned to Varfell without mishap. I'm going to ask the Oracle whether anything significant has occurred in the town since the companions were last there. A 3. That's a no but. Okay, I'm going to roll on the mythic event meaning chart for a prompt for that but. Rolling percentile dice twice. Action first. 38. Inform. Now the subject. 71. A representative. Inform a representative. Well, that seems quite straightforward. I also want to know whether Hedrick has returned to Varfell. A 4. That's a yes but. Okay then. Chapter 72. Part 3. Day 65. Late evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged. The fellowship of Lord Teuoc's hall had departed, his retinue dismissed and sent to their abodes, the long trestle table stripped bare of cup and platter. The echoes of laughter and song had faded, leaving behind only the low crackle of the hearth's fire and the smell of smoke and spilt ale. A handful of men remained, posted at the hall's entrance with spear and shield, along with one other who now sat nearby. The man who had guided the companions into the dragon's spine, Hedrick. Teuoc waited in patient silence while the companions filled their bellies and slaked their thirst. His gaze was steady, and unhurried, taking in not only the fresh scars that marked their bodies, but also the unfamiliar presence among them, measuring each without comment. Beric had watched Teuoc closely as Edith had answered the Lord of Varfell's address. Even beneath the grime and the tatters of her garb, Teuoc had clearly discerned the marks of noble birth, and Beric noted how Edith herself had unconsciously shifted, her posture straighter, her words measured and formal, as though she stood once more among peers rather than fellow travellers. When they had eaten their fill, Beric, supported by the others, retold the events of the past week. Their ascent into the mountains, the vault of Penmelkine, the nightmare horrors of the Rift, and the fate of Demelza and the Eye of Krevik. Hedrick corroborated the tale where he could, the mountain guide admitting that he had been forced to flee the valley when confronted by the Sheo de Gengar. Angry, half-healed wounds traced his weather-beaten face and arms, attested that he had only narrowly escaped with his life. When the companions concluded their account, Teuoc leaned back in his carved throne, fingers resting upon its worn arms, his expression unreadable. His eyes shifted slowly from one face to the next, lingering for a moment on Lena, whose faint aura glimmered softly like embers caught in the slightest breeze. At last he rose, stepping down from the dais.
You have struck a blow to the enemy.
His voice was low and deliberate, his keen eyes distant with thought.
For now, this news should be kept close.
Why, my lord? Because believing the Eye of Krevik can still be found will distract the enemy.
Valen answered instead, his tone calm but edged with intent.
Without all the Hellstones, Reynard may hesitate, granting those loyal to the king more time. But that is not certain.
Beric countered, skeptically.
True enough, Beric. But we lose nothing.
Teuoc inclined his head in approval of the mage's reasoning.
Indeed. Only this day I have received word from Lord Petroc. It would seem that Lord Canute arrived at Penglanau 4 days since.
A breath of relief passed through the companions, none more audible than Beric's.
What news, my lord?
Lord Canute has sailed to find Einar, and Lord Conwyn musters his forces alongside my liege. As for my beseech, my lord cannot send reinforcements. He has instead commanded that I bring half my warriors to Penglanau with all haste.
But what about the town's defenses?
Beric asked.
That I must entrust to my remaining housecarls. They, together with the free men of Varfell, will hold fast.
A shadow crossed the Thane's features, hardening his expression.
War will soon be upon us,
he said bitterly.
And the only victor should be the crows.
He reached out and clapped a hand on Beric's shoulder.
I will tell my lord of what you have done. One day the world shall know of your valor.
His gaze shifted briefly to Edith.
And your sacrifice.
Stepping back, he raised his cup, a grim smile pulling at his lips.
But until then, if no one else, I shall honor you.
Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show to reach new listeners. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? Returning to the show, playing the role of Lord Teuoc, is Carl White. Carl is the creator of the superb The Lone Adventurer podcast, a no-frills barred hybrid solo play audio drama set in Carl's homebrew Magitech world. If you like what I do here, then I seriously recommend checking out Carl's show. Also returning, playing the role of Maelor, is Mike Burnett. Mike is the game master and host of the brilliantly funny and irreverent Billowing Hilltop podcast. I love how the show's bonkers shenanigans mirror my own experience of playing at a live table. My sincere thanks to both Carl and Mike, whose links are put in the show notes. You could also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. While I'm here, be sure to check out SoloRoleplayer'sNetwork.com, where you can find a curated list of the very best hybrid solo RPG audio dramas out there. Finally, I'd love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones, at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the Bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone.
It's fiction in a flash. Bite-Sized Tales is the audio fiction podcast for people who like their stories short and sweet. Flash fiction stories from a universe of genres delivered straight to your ears every week. No longer than 15 minutes, Bite-Sized Tales takes you to a different world on your morning commute, coffee break, or dog walk. Audio fiction one bite at a time. Bite-Sized Tales. Meet the authors and download your stories at bitesizedtales.com.